If you want to learn how to plan your academic career in the field of psychology, stay with me. Hello and welcome to howtobecome-a-professor.com, the web show to learn from proven professors and experts. I'm your host Stefan, and today you will learn how Susan Carey, professor of psychology at Harvard, would plan her career in the field of psychology today. Susan is an expert in language acquisition and children's development of biological concepts and is known for introducing the concept of fast mapping, whereby children learn the meanings of words after a single exposure. She was employed at MIT and New York University before joining the faculty at Harvard University in 2001, where she is currently chair of the psychology department. She was elected a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, Carey is a fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, and has received many academic awards and distinctions, including the Shaw-Nicoll Prize for Philosophy of Mind in 1998, and she was the first woman to receive the Rumelhart Prize in 2009, which has been given annually since 2001 for significant contributions to the theoretical foundations of human cognition. Carey is the author of Conceptual Change in Childhood, which reconciles Piaget's work on animism with later work on children's knowledge of biological concepts. Susan Carey, thank you very much for taking your time. I really appreciate it. It's a big honor.
Well, thank you.
The very first question I'd like to ask you is, how would you plan your academic career in the field of psychology from the bachelor degree to professorship today? And if it's possible, please try to be as specific as possible.
Okay. So, first of all, I wouldn't plan my academic career as an undergraduate. Right? I mean, the first thing you have to do as an undergraduate is discover what your passion is. I would, as I did, I was very interested in psychology from my courses, get involved in research. Volunteer to help your professors, or if there are lab courses that they offer where you can get involved in a lab, because you have to see whether you like the process of constructing the knowledge in the field. Every field is intellectually exciting when you read the products of it. Right. But what you do on a day-to-day basis, if you're a historian, for example, couldn't be more different than what you do on a day-to-day basis if you're an experimental scientist. And you might not like what you do on the day-to-day basis as an experimental science. You might not like the very, very meticulous care you have to take to do everything exactly right. The repetitiveness of many aspects of it, and poring over data to try to make sense of it. Now, so the first thing you need to do is, for anything that intellectually interests you, is get some experience about how that knowledge is actually produced. Mm-hmm. And the other thing you have to do as an undergraduate and a graduate student is find out, discover at an abstract level what question you might possibly want to spend your life contributing to answering. Right? If you don't know that, if you don't have a passion to understand something particular, there's no point in having an academic career. Right? So you first have to find out for yourself whether you both have a passion for the particular scientific or other questions that the discipline asks, and also whether you have a talent for the day-to-day, a talent and a tolerance for the day-to-day shit work, really, that is involved in in doing that. So my advice to undergraduates is explore, find a way to get research experience, because that's how you learn to answer both of those questions.
Right.
And then you're in a position to decide whether you even want a career as a professor.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And now there are more than one ways you can be a professor. Right. The two major ways are to see it as a teaching career, or to see it as a research career where teaching is an important part of it, at least in the United States. In Europe, there are pure research jobs much more commonly than like in the Max Planck Institutes or in CNRS in France. That's not a career option that you can take in the United States. In the United States, if you're going to be a researcher, you're also going to be a teacher. You're going to be a professor. And I actually think that's a better way of organizing things, because it means that students are taught by people who are at the cutting edge of the research, and they, even as undergraduates, have a chance of getting involved in labs. But in the United States, there is still a distinction between seeing yourself as a teacher and maybe teaching at a undergraduate college, mm-hmm. or seeing yourself as a researcher and teaching at a major research university. And those are really quite different career paths, and they have different ways of preparing for them. But they both start with PhDs. So the advice I gave before is still the same. Right. You're not going to be a good teacher of psychology at any level if you don't know how to produce new psychological results and contribute to the development of the field. So we could talk. So let's talk first about how you learn, how you prepare yourself to work at a major research university. That's the career path I took. Right. And then we could talk at the end about the slightly few things you would do differently if your interest is teaching in a wonderful undergraduate college, because it's slightly different.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if you shouldn't go into a PhD program, and furthermore, you're unlikely to be accepted into a very good PhD program if you haven't had research experience, and if you're not able to talk with enough knowledge to be convincing about what problem it is that you want to devote your life to solving, mm-hmm. right? And so that's the first thing, is to answer those questions. Then the next thing is to choose the right PhD program, mm-hmm. where you know that there are people that you can study from who are going to help you learn how to answer the questions that you have decided that you're going to spend your life trying to understand. So it's really, really important to choose the right PhD program, mm-hmm. because psychology is a huge, huge, huge field, and every department only has a small subset of all of the work in psychology represented there, and you're going to at least partly apprentice yourself to somebody. So you have to choose the somebody who is a good match for what you want to learn. Furthermore, that's the way to get accepted in a graduate program. I mean, we, at the other end, as we're looking at our applicants, we have many more applicants who are smart enough and well prepared and obviously very effective students than we can accept. So we try to accept people mm-hmm. who we think will benefit from what we have to offer, right? Who want to learn what we have to teach. And the ones we accept are the ones who have done enough so that they can describe that in a way that shows that they know enough about what they want that they're applying to us, right?
Yeah.
So you want to find a match between what you want to do and what the place that you're going to has to offer. Um, and then if there are other desiderata that I think you should take into account as you're trying to find a good match as a graduate program. And I can't emphasize how important it is what graduate program you go into. Mm-hmm. You want one where students are encouraged to develop their own research programs and that there are actual mechanisms in place to allow that to happen, you know, where you're encouraged to work with, to change. I mean, we don't really expect students to necessarily end up with the same answer to the question of what question do I want to spend my life understanding at the end of a PhD program as they went into it with. Mm. You don't really know enough as an undergraduate to answer that question. And so your interests can change as a graduate student, and you want to be in a program that allows that and that supports you in working with many different faculty members and doing independent work. And the other thing you want to do is you want to find out what happens to graduates of that program. You know, is it a program where people go on to good jobs, et cetera? Because this is the very, very important first decision you ever make as a budding academic is where to study to do your PhD, because that's where you develop your the beginnings of a research program. So that's the first thing. Then you just continue doing what I've already laid out. You know, you're really trying to you're learning by doing research, right? Mm-hmm. And from the beginning, even as an undergraduate, you want to be involved, if you can, in seeing research projects through to some completion, right? So you want to at least be finding results that you can present at poster sessions, maybe only internal to your school, maybe student poster sessions, you know, between schools. If the projects you're working on are, I mean, often you're working with postdocs and graduate students, you're helping with them. If you can be involved enough to be involved in the writing of the paper, even to be a co-author by maybe writing up the methods and results or something like that, that's very, very good experience. And you want to be as professional as you can, mm-hmm. given your stage of development. And of course, it's very heavily mentored when you're an undergraduate or a young graduate student. You'll be publishing papers with your mentors. But if you can the undergraduates often become co-authors on papers if they stick with a project long enough, and that's very good experience. Mm-hmm. Just a good experience to see whether there is a match between your talents and your interests and what's actually required to do the professional work.
Right.
But then the other important thing is you simply just have to do the hard work of learning the techniques that are needed to do the research. And this is how things are really different from when I was starting out, mm-hmm. right? I mean, I don't have the skills that my own students have. I mean, they need me to help to learn how to frame an argument and choose a good question. Mm-hmm. I need them because I couldn't do the research by myself anymore, right? I don't have the programming techniques, the computational techniques, the imaging techniques. I mean, basically, it's a much more technique-driven discipline than when I did my PhD, which was 50 years ago. So you can't learn enough math, you can't learn enough statistics, you can't learn enough programming. You need to learn how to do the technical things. If neuroimaging is a technique that you're going to be using, you have to learn how to do it and how to do the statistical analyses. To do that, you need to work with experts who have those skills, and I encourage my students to collaborate with many different people in the Boston area to learn the skills that they need to master themselves to do the research that they want to do, and then I get to benefit because I'm a collaborator on those research, and I couldn't produce those data, but I can certainly interpret them.
Right. I have one question regarding the techniques, right? You said yourself it's really hard to learn the techniques, and there are so many different techniques and methodologies and so forth. And how it's kind of overwhelming. What is the best way to learn?
You learn them as you need. That's why I say you start with the problem that you're interested in.
Right.
And you find mentors that know how to do work that excites you in making progress and answering them.
Right.
And then you learn the techniques one at a time as you need it for a particular research project you're doing.
I understand.
Right? Yeah. But even as an undergraduate, if you want a career in science, you want programming skills, mathematical skills, computational modeling skills. I mean, you should definitely be working on those skills in general. They will serve you well, whatever science you do. Right.
Right.
But you learn the skills as if you're going to be working with babies, for example, using the kinds of methods I do, you have to know how to use an eye tracker. Okay, well then you learn when you have an experiment that requires you to use an eye tracker, then you learn to use an eye tracker.
Yeah,
right?
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So you don't. I mean, you don't try to learn them apart from the problems that you're trying to solve.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. So, so always learn the techniques and target your learning. Your learning process should be targeted on the problem you are aiming to solve, right? Okay,
right.
I understand. Okay, thank you so much. Let's move a little bit further to the second part of our interview. It's called selection. What are, in your opinion, the most relevant milestones along the road to professorship? In particular, we're interested in what are the most relevant conferences to attend, and to which journals shall young academics in the field of psychology aspire to submit their original work? Is it possible to break it down for each stage of the career?
No. The most important milestone, hands down, without any question, is to do an important thesis. Is to have a thesis that is really original and substantive. And your mentors will know what journals to aim for. It is very important to be finishing work and presenting work, but what the important conferences are depend upon the subfield.
Sure.
The big conferences like the American Psychological Association Conference or the American Psychological Society, those conferences aren't particularly the right conferences to present your work. They're specialty conferences, and depends on what branch of psychology you're in, which which specialty conferences you are. In my field, there's a conference called Infancy from the International Society of Infancy Studies. Mm-hmm. There's the Society for Research in Child Development. There's the Cognitive Development Society. There's the Cognitive Science Society. There's the Society for Philosophy and Psychology. Those are all conferences that I go to. I don't go to them all every year because I need to have time to get work done. I mentor my students about where they, it is important to be getting out there. It's, as soon as you have a result that can be a poster at a conference, you should make it a poster at a conference and you should present it there. But your mentors will know if you've got, what the right conference is for that work, where there will be other people who are doing things that are similar that you're going to want to learn to meet, and you're going to want them to see your poster and respond to it. Right. So the advice is, for sure, present at conferences, and even more important, publish, right? And that's another thing that's very different from when I was a graduate student. Nobody was expected to publish anything before they they had their PhD. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, things are much more professionalized. It's also better mentored. So your mentors will be even writing papers with you, partly so that you will publish them, right? But so you want to publish. You want to publish in the most prestigious journals possible. Mm-hmm. But your mentors will have a realistic idea of what level to aspire to. But it's perfectly possible for psychology graduate students to do work that's published in Nature and Science or the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, or one step down, psychological science, developmental science, cognitive psychology. Your mentors will know what the top-ranked journals are, and it's easy enough for you to find out as well, just by going online and looking at citation indexes and things like that. So basically, whenever you publish, you want to publish in the most prestigious journal where the work could find a home. But the main thing is publish, publish, publish. Finish the argument, finish the argument, finish the argument, because that's how you learn how to do it, right? But there isn't anything to be said about, you got to do this by this time, or this by that time. Okay. It doesn't work like that. But what you want is, by the time you have your PhD, right, is a research program that's identified with you, right, and that isn't just a clone of your advisor, right? In our department, we aspire and we succeed in producing PhDs where people can't even guess who their advisor was. Okay. Because they've actually published with several different faculty members at Harvard and also at MIT. We have a very close working relationship with MIT. They've published papers on their own. And people often misguess who their primary advisor was. So we're lucky we can afford to do that because we don't have to support graduate students on grants. So they can really do their own independent work. But anyway, you definitely want to have the richest research program you can by the time you finish your PhD. And then it's very common to have a postdoc. And there, too, it's the really crucial thing is the choice of a mentor. Right. Now that you know what your research program is, what new techniques, to do this work, you'll have a very good, by the time you have your PhD, you're responsible for developing your own research career. And you'll know if you've been properly trained. You know what the cutting edge work in this research is, this kind of computational modeling, this kind of neuroimaging, and I don't know how to do that yet. So you identify a postdoc advisor who's interested in the problem you're interested in, and maybe in some skills that you can bring to the lab that the lab doesn't have, to continue to develop your own unique network of enterprises and skills that are all aimed at answering the kind of question that you're trying to answer.
Right.
And all along, you're pushing it through till you finish things, which means you're presenting them at conferences and you're publishing. And again, your mentors will tell you, will be able to advise you about where to publish. Also, by that time, you've read, you've been in the field for 10 years by the time you're finishing a postdoc. So you know yourself the journals that present the kind of work that you're trying to do.
Sure,
right?
definitely.
Yeah. Nobody from the outside can, in general, say what are the important conferences or what are the important journals. It's very, very, very specific to the work that
you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you for this differentiated answer. I understand. And I understand that there is no really, default recipe for the career path, right? It really needs to be individualized and personalized.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the very last part of our interview. I call it stakes. Have you been maintaining a high level of motivation and discipline throughout your entire career building process? And how do you recover from drawbacks that happen naturally, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, you have to have a very thick skin to be an academic. You are constantly being rejected. Mm-hmm. Your grants are being turned down. Your papers are being rejected. Happens to me, right? And so, what you do. I mean, whenever I get an article turned down or a grant turned down, I take it to my lab meeting. And everybody in the lab meeting sees the rejection. And my purpose for that is twofold. Mm-hmm. Is I model for my students, okay, now what am I going to do about this? And also, this is a way of saying to my students, look, this is going to happen to you all the way throughout your career.
Right? Susan, sorry, your video just ended.
Oh, let me put it back on. Mm-hmm. Oh. It's not coming back on.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. It came.
Oh.
Have you got it?
It's not. Yes. Okay.
It's showing me here.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Continue, please.
So the purpose of this is modeling that it happens even to me. I mean, I'm very, very successful in my career, and it happens to me. And secondly, to model what you do about it. And what you do about it is, I mean, it's very traumatic. When I was young, before you did everything electronically, you submitted a paper to a journal and then you got the reviews by mail. And I would often be unable to open the envelope when it first came because I just didn't want to face the possibility of rejection. Mm-hmm. What you have to do is you read over the reviews right away. You always, to have a productive career, you're always writing something, right? Once you've started, then you organize your work. So while you're finishing writing up one piece, you already know what the next thing you're going to be writing up is going to be. So you're making sure that all that work is finished, that you have all the data you need to make the argument. Right. So that as soon as you finish this piece, you're starting to write the next one.
Right.
Right. And you have many other projects in various states of completion, but you want to organize it so there's always one that's complete enough to be writing up at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get a rejection, now I'm talking about a journal rejection, you immediately put that back up to the top of the push-down stack because you've already done the work on that for it to be finished from your point of view.
Right.
So you go over the reviews, and usually, in fact, my experience is always, my experience has been that a rejected article eventually gets published, right? And so partly when you're reading the reviews, you ask, what did I fail to make clear? You know, to what extent do these reviews reflect that a misunderstanding of what this was about? Of course, that's my fault if people misunderstand it. I didn't make it clear.
Right.
But sometimes the reviews actually have arguments in it that are really good ones that force you to rethink things. And so the first thing you do is you go over the reviews, you really, really come to understand what the problems are, and then you decide whether you can fix it without doing more experimental work, which usually, in my experience, you can, but sometimes there's an experiment that wouldn't be that hard to do that would completely nail it, in which case it's worth doing that. And then that, of course, gets off the stack then that isn't the one you can write up next because you have to do that experiment, right?
Right.
The point is you deal with it right away. You do not let the trauma of it mean that it sits in a desk for a year, right? Turn it around as fast as you can. Mm-hmm. Deal with it and send it back in, right? If it's a revise and resubmit, if it's an out-and-out rejection, send it to a different journal after you've fixed the problems. Similarly with a grant proposal. When a grant proposal is turned down, it comes with criticisms. Most, you can revise it and send it back in, right? You just have to learn to do that. And in psychology papers and grants greatly benefit from the peer review process. At least in the branches of psychology I'm in, reviewers are incredibly generous with their time. And usually the criticism is very productive. I mean, they're trying to help the authors make a better paper.
Right.
And my experience is that my papers are always very much improved by the process of rewriting them. I mean, it doesn't mean you think when you send in a paper it was finished. Mm-hmm. It's discouraging to have to do a whole lot more work on that paper. You're sick of it, but the net result is always a better paper. Mm-hmm. So the point is, you just have to be prepared for that kind of rejection.
Right.
And you have to just fix the problems and go forward.
The last thing I'm very interested in is in your working routine. Do you have a special working routine?
I do. I think everybody does. Mm-hmm. So for me, the essential part of my working routine is to build in time every day to write. Mm-hmm. This is following my own advice of always having a paper I'm writing. Mm-hmm. And it might only be a half an hour or an hour. Sometimes it's a couple hours or 3 hours. I mean, I'm very busy. I have many, many meetings with graduate students and postdocs and research assistants. And I also very much like teaching. And preparing classes and teaching is time consuming too. But I always spend at least a half an hour and hopefully more like 2 hours a day writing. Mm-hmm. And that means the paper that I'm working on is always in my head.
Yeah.
And, if you work a half an hour a day, if all you can work is half an hour a day, in a month the paper is done. right? At least a complete draft of the paper is done.
Right.
So that's, for me, I mean, everybody has their own way. Other people really prefer to block off whole days for when they write. I can't actually write for a whole day. That's just too intense of a thinking process. I mean, writing is when you really make the arguments work.
Right.
It's really when you do your hard work. So that doesn't work for me, but this does work for me. Every single day, 7 days a week.
Okay.
But that's just because I like, even if I'm on vacation, I'm likely to write a couple hours a day. But that's because I really like that. I mean, it's a pleasure to have. When I'm on vacation, I'm not meeting my students and my research assistants, so I actually have the time.
Right.
And if I don't feel like it, I won't. I mean, it's not like I'm driven to. It's just that I choose to. It's a gift to have that time. But anyway, that's the secret to continuing to develop your ideas. Write. And then everything else, it's science, including psychology, is a very collaborative enterprise.
Right.
It's one of the things I really like about it. So you have to meet with your collaborators, your students, your postdocs, your research assistants, and you have to build the time for that into your day. And also, the longer you stay in the field, the more responsibility you have for the institutions you're part of. So early on in your career, you're only responsible for your own work, right? But as soon as you become an assistant professor, you're also responsible for your students' careers, right? That's a very big responsibility. If you have a graduate student, you're responsible to getting them going on a project which is going to yield results that's going to get them a job.
Right.
Right? So the next responsibility you have is for your lab, right? It's you're the head of a lab as soon as you're a professor. Then you have responsibility for your department and for your field. You become an editor. You become somebody who reviews grants. You have to do administrative work in your department. Like, as you said, I'm actually no longer chair. Hooray, I just finished being chair.
Okay.
But it was, it's sometimes, somebody has to do the work to make the university go. The university is only the people in it. And so you get more and more responsibility as you stay in the field more for the field in general and for your institution in general, and you have to build the time to discharge those responsibilities into your day. But I would go crazy if I ever let all of those other obligations take away my at least a half an hour a day writing. And that's, that is sacrosanct. A half an hour is not that long.
Right.
And even students should be writing every day.
Right. Okay. Susan, thank you so much. I'm trying to wrap this up. First, construction in the first part of our interview. Susan, you explained really step by step how you would plan your career from an undergraduate until now to the professorship in the field of psychology today. Second, in our second part, selection, you shared with us that in your opinion, it's the responsibility of your mentor to tell you, to guide you, which are the relevant journals to submit your original work to, and also which conferences to attend. And in the last section, stakes, you generously told us how you have been maintaining such a high level of motivation and discipline throughout your entire impressive career. Susan Carey, thank you so much for contributing so much value to the Online School for Unconventional Academics. We learned, we learned so much from you, and it was very practical, very actionable, and I'm very appreciative that you was that you were that specific. And I'm sure that many of our users will put your recommendations into good use. As always, I'd like to end my interview with following quote: "The best advice is worth nothing if it's not put into practice." Susan Carey, thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you. This is a great project. Thank you for doing it.